Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Hey, welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and super excited. I don't have a lot of guests on to talk about this subject. So when they reached out and asked if they could be on this podcast to share this skill set and this concept and mindset, I was like, yes, thank you. We need more of these people. So we're going to be hearing from Elliott Holland today, and he is the founder of Guardian Due Diligence, entrepreneur, business buying expert. And I really want you to be clear here, business buying expert. And this is what's so cool is he's gone through the effort to learn really how to identify a business that's worth buying, how to buy it and make it successful, and how to broker that deal so that the buyer, so it's a win-win-win for everybody, right? You don't want anybody feeling like they got screwed. You want to make sure that it's a win-win-win for everybody. And he's here to help us understand how you could make that happen. Like what things to look for, what are the key aspects. But first we got to find out who he is and his story. And that's what I'm excited to hear about. So go ahead, Elliott, share with us really from early childhood, where you went in life, how you ended up where you are, and where you see yourself going in the future.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me here. And I'll kick it off. Childhood was cool. I was born in Detroit, Michigan. Both my parents were financial consultants, both entrepreneurial. In fact, I do work very similar to what my father did. I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan when I was 4, and actually, crazy enough, overshot Ann Arbor school district. So I went to school in a suburb of Ann Arbor, and I was the only Black kid in my graduating class of 350.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, the senior class photo is hilarious. I might show that to you after the show. I wanted some diversity, so I ended up going to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, to go to school. I skipped through a lot of stuff earlier. I would say my father passed when I was 14. Things got a little messy at home. I think for those who have sort of been through the death of a parent, when you're in your sort of high school years, can understand what I mean. So I was equally academically happy to be leaving the state, but also sort of professionally and personally happy. I would say the motivation I got out of dealing with the pain of my father passing probably still drives me to this point. So maybe it does make sense to sit in that for a second. People sometimes think that Harvard guys always had it on a silver platter. And I'll tell you that the ones that fight the best had to fight through the most stuff. So when I left Ann Arbor to go to Atlanta, I was super excited, was fortunate enough to get a scholarship, went to Morehouse College. They have a dual degree engineering program with Georgia Tech. And so I did mechanical engineering. For those who don't know, engineering is hard as nails. You don't get a degree without spending a couple nights in the library. I remember having tests out of 20 points, getting 2 points out of 20, and the average was 3. And then you listen to the professor berate you about how stupid you are, and you come back after that and keep trying.
Hopefully they grade on a curve, right?
They do, which is funny because you sort of have the gift and the curse. It's like a gut punch and then like a piece of pie.
Yeah.
So the average is 3, so you got a C. But what happened is like you looked at a test with 5 questions where you could do nothing, and you had studied for 2 months. It was just the mindset of how it comes at you is just crazy. So I after undergrad decided to go work in strategy consulting. And I worked at Accenture in Atlanta doing strategy consulting, which essentially is just helping businesses improve their profit. You can do a bunch of different projects. You can help with installing softwares. You can help with marketing strategy. You can help with understanding operations, customer mix, a bunch of things. But essentially, a strategy consultant is helping companies improve their bottom line. I did that for 3 years. The story I tell is I'm an engineer, top 5 school, get into Accenture. I was there during the market crash of 07, 08. So all of the strategy consulting budgets went away, and we could only do work that helped improve cash flow. And cash flow is a calculation that takes both the income statement and the balance sheet. And so we're doing this work on slides. And I'm asking people, how do you calculate the cash flow and how are you getting to these numbers? And I remember this guy told me, well, Elliott, it's just too complicated, man. Just do it like this, and I'll just keep telling you how to do it. And I kicked myself and I said, there's no way there's something mathematical that basically a mathematician can't understand. Somebody's lying. I went to business school. I was fortunate enough to get into Harvard and got into and interested in the private equity industry. So that'll be a big umbrella around the next 10 years of my life that I'll try to hop through here in some format. Industry is very hard to get into. It's Wall Street. It's sharp elbows, but it's an amazing way to create opportunity. Essentially, what you're doing is you're buying a business the same way you buy a house. And so you're putting in 10, 20% and you're laying in 80% debt. And if you pay off the debt, a house is $250,000, a business is $5 million. So you can go from a pretty small investment to the $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million asset that you own, in a similar fashion to buying the house, but it's a whole industry. So I got into that industry, hustling, calling people. I wasn't the standard candidate coming off of Wall Street. I was coming out of consulting, so I had to work a little bit harder. I actually landed a job that I started in my last year at Harvard Business School. So I started my full-time job in February and worked it full-time until I finished and on after school, because there were too few spots to not take that opportunity. I worked it for a couple of years, and just being entrepreneurial, I teamed up with not a business partner, a mentor at the time. We started our own private equity firm called Ellsworth Partners, where we bought companies $2 to $8 million in EBITDA. I then spun out of that when he retired and started my own company, Spartan Capital, where I bought companies that were $1 to $2 million in EBITDA, a bit smaller. And the process of buying businesses as an independent entity rather than at a private equity firm is so different, because you have to manage the situation of you're looking at a business you want to buy and you're not 100% sure you can actually finance the business. You think you can. And so you're managing a lot of things at the same time. And this is around 2017. So I ended up looking at the marketplace and seeing a huge opportunity to help people who are independent business buyers to execute transactions, because I found that the marketplace, the accountants and the lawyers that you need to help execute transactions are not really well suited for transactions. You think about the biggest accounting firms in the world, they're looking at Coca-Cola's books, Home Depot's books, Caterpillar's books. They want big companies, complex financials, international stuff, all of that. And so when you come in with your transaction, you think it's big, it's $1 million to you, and they talk with billions, your little deal doesn't often get serviced appropriately. So I started a business in 2017 called Guardian Due Diligence. And what we do is provide a full suite of services to help business buyers execute better transactions, from deal sourcing to evaluating which deal to focus on, writing up an offer to give to the seller, doing due diligence, and I'll come back to that, raising capital, and then helping people to grow businesses after they buy them. The reason I'll come back to due diligence, one of our main products is called Equality of Earnings, which is an accounting analysis of a private company to make sure the numbers are solid. And that's one of the big services we provide. So I tried to sort of weave through my life and upbringing and whatnot, and hopefully the story was compelling. I hope I didn't lose anyone.
Sure. No, I mean, there's definitely a lot, and that's what I love about. I'm going to touch on something here, but there's a lot there. I want to go back. Young though, what do you feel like? You mentioned that your parents were both entrepreneurial in the financial services industry. That's such a broad term. Like, what area of financial services were they actually in?
Sure. My father helped a lot of the first Black business owners in Detroit to get bank financing. So he worked for the Small Business Administration, both for them and then as an independent consultant, helping those people take their packages into banks communicate them appropriately so people could raise financing, and then did sort of development deals around sort of the Midwest, both in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. So that was his business, helping people sort of get financing from banks. And then my mother, she did more municipal finance. So the example I talk about is Detroit at the time needed a new sewer system. And so they went to public markets on Wall Street to raise bond money, debt money from public markets. And she was working for banks going to New York to do that. So that was the kind of work they did.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that I want to focus in on what your dad did, because I think this is where a lot of this, well, I'm going to ask another question before I go to that. What do you feel like you learned most from watching your parents working in this industry? Yes, they had the entrepreneur spirit. Yes, they had these things. But what real qualities, characteristics do you feel like you look back on regularly and say, I learned that like this came from my parents. The way I behave and act right now came from the programming that I received when I was younger.
My dad pushed entrepreneurship really hard. So I think I learned the value of that. It was almost as important as going to school or going to church. Like, you had to learn about entrepreneurship in my house. I think I learned about negotiations. You know, I was 14 when my dad passed, but I can remember like being like 10 to 14 and him laying out negotiations around deals he was doing in the car and asking me what I thought. And, you know, you're a kid. Oh, well, can you talk to Rob about it? Or can you go send a letter over here? You're trying your best to just say something that may be accurate, but you're sort of getting trained for negotiations, how to move someone from A to B. What else did I learn? I think a lot of people, particularly when they get into very formal academic places, forget that like Coca-Cola was a guy who thought sugar water would sell. Mm-hmm. That's it. Caterpillar is a company where a guy thought that the trailers and tractors he saw sucked, and he strung one together on a bootstrap budget. I say that to say, you can create a business. You can start something. You can change it. You can go market. You by yourself with the faculties you've been provided are good enough to go start something, put a one-pager together, put a marketing thing together, make some phone calls and go. So I had that gumption, but to be honest, I also had the fear. So my parents' business at times in their history were going really well. At other times, not so well. And so I also had the trepidation around downside risk. When I was sort of in those teen years, neither one of my parents' businesses were going all that well. And so I had both the upside opportunity knowledge, but also the knowledge of what downside scenarios look like.
Yeah, I think that I want to touch on all of that, but the main thing that I hope if everybody just listens to this podcast over and over and over, I hope the one thing they get is the second thing you said. The second thing that these big businesses we see, Facebook, Google, Caterpillar, Home Depot, it doesn't matter. They were just people who saw a need and said, I can do this better. Or Coca-Cola is not, I wouldn't say really a need, but I can sell this. They saw something, they're like, I can sell this, and they just moved on. And every one of us has that innately in us. We all have a gift. We all have a thing. And the question is, what's your thing? And then how are you surrounding yourself with the right people who are going to trust and believe in you and pull you up so that you can share your thing?
That's it.
You could have those things and nobody believes in you and you just tuck it away and think, it's not going to ever work. Or you could have that thing and say, no, I'm going to go for this, and have the right people around you say, hey, how can we help you? How can we support you? And that's what is the difference between success or failure, is your surroundings and people who believed in you or not.
I mean, I'll add to that. It was all these companies started with a person that had an idea that thought they could do it better, that was ridiculed, that failed, that tried to sell it initially and they were told that's laughable. Get this sugar water out of my face. Get this weird I'm not sharing my picture. That's stupid. Everyone had to get through the fact that they saw a market need sufficient for them to want to spend time on it, and that the world didn't give a you-know-what about their thoughts on it. And they had to push through that risk, that doubt, that fear, that uneasiness, that unknown to get to, it sucks, but I got a lot of customers.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks, but I'm getting a lot of good feedback. And all of a sudden, nobody says it sucks anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the trick there is, I don't know if it's a trick. It's not a trick. It's just how the natural laws of the universe work. But you have to be able to see in your mind's eye the future success of this. And if you can see that clearly in your mind and you have a picture, you know what it feels like to walk around, taste, feel, touch the success, then that will happen eventually.
Right.
That will come to pass eventually. And that's such an incredible skill. I'm just thinking, I'm asking this because I view myself as an entrepreneur. I view myself as somebody who has the ability to teach my two sons. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old good skills. And I think, hey, what are some things that I would love for my kids to learn from me? And I don't think I've really put it that way. I've thought about it in my legacy coaching, but I haven't really thought about it that way, that all these people were just normal. They saw it. They decided they were going to be successful regardless. And if I could pass just that one belief onto my two sons, I would love that, because it doesn't matter what they believe they can do. As long as they believe they can do it, that's a winning mentality in and of itself. And I love that you brought that up because it made me think, hey, how can I go share this with my family?
You got to empower them with the belief that they can do anything they want. And then the hard work. The last thing I didn't mention, my dad used to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I never understood it. Now I get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because you get between 3 and 8, nobody's going to bother you. You can do whatever you want, set your priorities, manage your day. So people have ideas and sometimes don't want to do the hard work. You got to do the hard work.
Sure. So another question I'm curious about, in that experience when your dad would ask you, hey, what to do, lay out these stuff. I'm curious if you can recall any time that he asked your opinion, you brought something up that he hadn't thought about, that there was a deal maker or something that actually moved it forward when he didn't know how to move it forward.
I probably got 1 or 2 in there, probably.
Probably. You like to think so?
Well, yeah. And here's the other thing I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey. When you give somebody an amazing idea, they don't always tell you.
That's true.
Like there's been times when I've had conversations with people where I gave them some game and I could see their eyes light up, right? But they got back into negotiation mode and didn't want to let me know that I had given them something. And so I think there were 1 or 2 times when I had something that was helpful, because I remember my dad would kind of lean back and you kind of know that's at least something worth considering. And when you're 11, you're thinking about these complex business systems. If you can figure out some of them at that age, I think it's a good bar. I feel like I did okay.
No, absolutely. I love that. The other thing was the first thing you mentioned was the negotiation communication. And this is something I want to touch on. I know a lot of engineers, quite a few engineers, and there's a small percentage of engineers who both are brilliant on the engineering side, but also know how to take that engineering knowledge and apply it to other business systems. So they're innovators. Not that if they stayed in the engineer field, they'd just be regular old engineers. But taking that engineering way of thinking and processing and system building and looking at a situation and turning that to business or sports or with these other things, that's when they become the Nobel Peace Prize winners, the people who really change the industry because they're able to cross stuff. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is they don't know how to communicate. There's probably less than 10% of engineering type people are great communicators. And I would say the same about you. You're a great communicator, but had you not had those experiences of seeing your dad's business was built on teaching other people how to communicate their dream to the people who they needed to believe in them.
Yes.
And that's another skill that without it, where would you be? Without that example, where would you be today?
I'll tell you something else to add on to that. You're totally right about the engineer can communicate and have some financial knowledge. We're dangerous people in a good way. It's a lot of difficult skill sets wrapped in one. The other thing, and look, I talk about race. I woke up with a tan. I can't avoid it. So being in high school and being like the only black guy, I was always in like the neighboring Ann Arbor high schools, just interacting with people that look like me, right? And I was always just having to walk up. I didn't have class with the dude or the young lady. The parties and the dances, I didn't get an invite. You know, I had to call somebody to sneak me in. And I think that that pain that I sort of took in high school, having to go reach out to people that I didn't know and just walk up to them and strike up conversations, was the training I needed to put with the strict engineering discipline to be able to have those conversations professionally, right? So now I'm in a negotiation with the seller. The guy saw a letter that I sent a week ago, never met me, and I need to make friends with this guy in a 2-hour meeting. It takes me right back to 17 years old, showing up at Ann Arbor Pioneer High School, trying to hang out with the folks that didn't go to school with me and just striking conversations. So sometimes the pain you take shows up as your differentiator later in life.
Yeah, no, I would actually agree with that. I did a whole, if you're listening to this, you want to go join the Fuel Your Legacy leadership group, but I did a whole conversation about this. I'll just touch on it. But your biggest, it stemmed from a conversation with my sister, Nolita Cardinelli. She's on a previous podcast, but she's a bookkeeper. And I was like, okay, so the nature of bookkeeping is these assets and liabilities, right? Well, how does that apply to the rest of your life? If you think about relationships, emotions, all this other stuff, it's my belief, just from my own personal experience, coaching hundreds of people, your biggest liabilities in life, your biggest things that are your detriment, that you hate, that you disdain when you're going through them, the equal and opposite reaction, right? What goes up must come down. The bigger your liability, the bigger your asset. I mean, there's a guy in Congress right now who lost his legs. He's paralyzed from waist down. And a large part of what, I mean, not that he's not an incredible human intellectually and character and all that, but a large part of what's novel about that is he's doing all of that. And he's talking about defending his country from a wheelchair as a result of defending his country, right? And say what you want about his political positions, he has, like, there's real evidence of like this liability. He could have said, oh, I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything. No, I'm going to go freaking run for Congress and I'm going to change the world. And your biggest liabilities are your biggest assets if you choose to recognize them and develop them into such.
Totally agree. There's a level that a person who lost their legs fighting for a country can convey that you or I can't.
No, we could talk about it. We can dream about it. Even if we didn't
make that sacrifice.
Yeah, even if we went and had the same experience, we were in the same battle right next to him, he lost his legs, we didn't, he wins, right? I mean, like, his ability to emotionally communicate that message is more impactful than for me. And that's not a bad thing. I have other skills or other things in my life that can help me have that same impact, but it's just not that skill.
For sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's so incredible to recognize and also to bring to the memory of the people listening. What are your liabilities? What are your things that you hated about high school? What are the things, the rejection, the pain, I had to go to this. I was never good at football, so I had to work extra hard. Right? I was listening to a Ed Milet podcast. I don't know if you know who that is, but
I don't.
I would strongly recommend listening to his podcast. But Ed Milet, he had Dierks Bentley on.
Oh.
And so we're listening to Dierks Bentley, and he asked him, hey, is this like, would you say that your ability to succeed, is it talent or is it skill? Mm-hmm. And Dierks was like 100% skill, 0% talent. He's not talented. He's just skilled. He's put in the hours and hours and hours and hours of effort to become skilled at something. And when he wanted to learn something new, he's talking about wanting to learn the mandolin. He's like, this is really hard. It's not fun. How do I get paid to learn the mandolin, right? So he started adding a section to his concerts where he gets to get up there and just fail basically at the mandolin, make it comical and fun, and get paid to do it, get paid to learn. So anyways, it's just interesting that he attributes all of his success to skill, determination, focus, effort, and not to talent at all. He's not the best singer. He's not the best songwriter. He's not the best musician. He's just worked and outworked most of the people. So he's one of the most accomplished country music artists ever.
You know, I think there's a lot to that. 10 years ago, I was asked in an article what I thought the equation for success was. They were like, oh, you think it's not, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And I think everybody has their own equation. For me, I think half of it is getting the right goals, like setting up where you want to go. That saying, you either plan for your future or somebody else will hire you to help deliver theirs. I think half of it's the plan, and I think half of it is persistence and perseverance, and I think the other piece is sort of getting over adversity. Your comment about the guy, I think there's a lot of hard work in there, but I fundamentally also believe like single mothers work harder than some of my investment banking friends.
Amen to that. Any mother, single or not, any mother works harder. I know my wife works harder than I do.
There's a guy moving boxes at Walmart that works really hard, and I'm not knocking that. What I'm saying is that I see a lot of people missing the strategy piece of their future. Missing, okay, I want to get here in 10 years. How do I manage my steps in the most efficient way so I have the best opportunity to get there? Which sometimes means taking a step back to get on the right path to go where you want to go. And I think some people have a hard time taking that step back. We talked about those people who are starting their businesses, that they have to get through that. You're crazy, your product stinks, right? That's that step back that releases your power to go far.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I'm curious about that. I have a question. If you're uncomfortable, that's fine. You don't have to answer, but I hope not. Again, I live in Utah primarily. Not a lot of black people out here. There's right. More than there was where I grew up. When I grew up in Parma, there was 2 black people. And I was friends with them and fine, but there's a perspective that I have that I don't know is true. I see people like you. I have other successful friends who happen to be black. Sure. And they've never let it become a barrier for them to succeed. But I'm curious if you'd be willing to share some insight. Like, do you feel like there was opposition that you had that you started out behind because of your color, or was it just life and you just decided to get on with it? And it's because I think, again, this is my perspective, and I want to know, my perspective is that it is perspective. If you believe you're behind, then you're behind. If you believe you're ahead, you're ahead. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like, what did you really experience looking back, and what kind of insight could you give somebody in that situation?
I'll try to answer this efficiently and somewhat eloquently. I think any person that's not part of the majority culture, based on my understanding of capitalism and who has the money and who controls the show, is behind in some capacity, right? We talk about women making less than men. We talk about minorities making less than white people. I think the data's out there on we start from behind. But my point of view was always like the game's being played, right? Like if I want to go play basketball on a soccer court, I'm the dummy, right? So here's the rules of the game. Run through the rules. You can only get as far as you can get. Bothering yourself with whether you're behind or ahead, I think as part of strategy helps you. I think sometimes as Black people, and I can speak for myself and my friends, sometimes our strategy has to involve the fact that we know we're Black and we're walking into very white circles. And so our strategy has to encompass that. But that guy in Congress, his strategy has to encompass the fact that he doesn't have legs. Women have to encompass the fact that they are not necessarily paid as much in the workforce. So for me, I equate everybody has different benefits and challenges. We talked about that earlier. I think being Black is one thing that does cause challenges, but I don't think that it matters. I just got off of a podcast a second ago. I was talking to somebody about in due diligence when you're checking on a company and you're asking for data and data and data. and you don't get the data you want. Like, what do you do, Elliott? And I told him at a certain point, you have to decide to either deal with the hand you're given or do something else. So maybe I differ a bit, but I think that as an individual, since I can't hop in your skin, the only play I have is to run as fast and as hard as I can. And, I dare somebody to get in my way. Like, it's going to hurt. And maybe I don't get as far as I would have had I been, born in a different place, but I also could have been born in a harder place. Like I talk about, I don't necessarily like the term. I think that privilege extends outside of being white. For instance, I had two financial parents who were entrepreneurs, and Eureka, I'm a financial entrepreneur. And so I think there's just, everybody gets dealt a different hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's my opinion, is that everybody has a different hand. And in my experience, again, I will never have the experience of being black. I don't think I ever will. I've already chosen my wife. I don't think I'm ever going to have the experience of having a black wife. I may, if I ever chose to adopt somebody, maybe would have a black child. But outside of that, like my experience is going to be fairly limited there. But I think for me, because we all start with whatever we have, I use this example, and not at all to compare long-term ramifications here, but sure. I grew up in a small town, homeschooled, and every day, if I wanted to play on a sports team, it was a battle to play on a sports team. If I wanted to do anything, then while you're there, you're getting made fun of, you're getting called stupid, you're getting called dumb, you're getting called gay, whatever, just because you're homeschooled. Even the other homeschool kids in the neighborhood who had more status or had been there longer, they would make fun of you. And it's like, not that it's a skin color thing, but everybody in my sphere knew that I was homeschooled, and they all made fun of me for it. And then the choice was, well, how are you going to react? Some kids would react by getting depressed and going in, not wanting to participate because they didn't like getting made fun of, or they'd react violently. I just chose, like, whenever somebody would make a slur against me, I would say, look, yeah, and yes, and, or what of it, right? Whatever. Like, does you calling me gay? So I'm gay. Okay. You think I'm gay? I'm not gay, but you think I'm gay? Okay. Then now what? Like, oh, well, they just are trying to get a row out of somebody. And if you choose not to let these things affect you, and you are so clear on where you're going, I wonder if that's just a bigger indication of success than those other circumstances. I don't know. I'll never be able to really make the comparison, but it's just something I
think we all get dealt a different hand. And I think I'm very hesitant to believe I have good insight on the pluses or minuses that somebody else has to deal with, only because so many times professionally, when I've tried to understand negotiations and think I can put myself in the head of a business broker, of a business owner, of a lawyer, of an accountant, if I'm as often wrong in understanding other people's like detriments or head starts as I am in assessing those professionals' opinions and motivations, then I'm probably not all that good at it, man. I'm just playing my hand. Let's go play some poker. What's up? I'm playing my hand.
I love that, and that's actually the next thing I want to talk about. When you were in engineer school and you're talking about how you get 2 or 3 right out of 20, and half of them you can't do. I had a professor. I hated her, but she was also probably one of my best professors. I learned so much, and so much of that class guides me now. So I'm super grateful for it, but it was a freaking hard psychology class. And she would create tests, just like you're saying, that like 90% of the class fail, intentionally miss word stuff. And then we'd go and we'd argue our case. Like, look, she's like, no, how I know it's a good question and should stay on my test is if less than 10% of the class got it right. That's a good question. If more than 50% of my class gets it right, I'm throwing the question out next test. I'm like, do you want people to fail? But here's the cool thing about it is throughout your whole life, and even through college, you had these experiences of sometimes in life, you only get 2 out of 20.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Some people they're trying to stack politics and stack religion and stack all this stuff. So they're getting these 20 out of 20s. And that's just not life. Sometimes in life, you get 2 out of 20, and you got to just do the best you can with 2 out of 20.
Dude, anything you start new, you are a 2 out of 20 performer. You stink.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
I'm gonna tell you a story. So I'm an engineer, finance dude, who was on the business buying seat. So I was selling money. It's a very easy thing to sell when you're a business buyer, right? That's the product I have is cash, easy. Now I'm selling my own financial services in a small business with a business partner outside of a big financial city. And now I have to learn marketing, sales, digital marketing. I'm taking digital marketing classes. So I'm 6-7 years out of a Harvard MBA, taking beginner level digital marketing classes and stinking up the place. You have to get through the 2 out of 20 to get to the 20 out of 20 if you're really playing a real game. And I think that's what you're saying is that, look, if I went to go try to get in a yoga competition today, maybe a 0.5 out of 20, right? But I got to be cool with that because, in assessing private businesses, I'm a 20 out of 20. And out of negotiations, I might be just that close. And I remember in strategy class in business school, and I love this, it was the diagram we had was like 6 or 7 different things: strategy, operations, sales, marketing, right? And he was like, okay, so like rate this company on all these things. And it was like, as soon as you started ranking certain things high, he was like, so what are you pulling down? Because you can't do all of this stuff amazingly well at the same time. So I'm with you. You gotta, sometimes it's 2 out of 20. And I actually think the growth happens in that moment when you realize you stink and you're like, I'm okay with this because the benefit of me practicing outweighs the pain of my frustration currently.
Yep, totally. Love that. So with that, when you come in, you go from private equity group where you're basically selling money, you go start your own business or at least two different firms, your first firm. But what was your main, I understand it from a private equity group. They're basically, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Sure.
My understanding of a private equity group is they're basically selling, they're selling returns to their investors. Their investors are giving them cash. With that cash, they're going and buying businesses. That's essentially it?
You got it.
So they're selling returns. But when you start doing it for yourself, are you also in the selling returns game, or are you buying businesses to fix and flip for your own cash flow? Are you buying businesses as an outside investor just to sit and have some passive income? Like, what's your motivation, your intention, other than it's fun, and no matter, even if you were broke, you'd do it because it's an exciting, intellectually stimulating thing to do, right? But what's the financial benefit? What were you trying to get out of when you started your own business, when you were buying these businesses yourself?
So I thought about that question a lot, but my engineering brain really likes understanding what I'm doing and being able to explain it simply. So when you're in a private investment firm, you are trying to reach top quartile performance. 100 firms, you want to be in the top 25. You're selling returns to your investors. Everybody's going to the same investors to get money. If I'm top quartile, I get more. If I'm bottom 25, I get less. That's the game. When you're in it for yourself, there's still a component of selling returns. So let's say you have the money bag, right? $1 billion, Utah. I'm actually going to Utah in 2 weeks to ski. So I might see you out there and ask you for some money. So I'm selling to you and all the other investors that I need to actually get my deal done, that this return is both solid and good. And it's relative to whatever portfolio of stuff that they have. And then I'm selling my specific buying process and take over your business process to the sellers. And so you're no longer thinking about top quartile. What you're trying to think of in the simplest terms, most investors who invest in private companies say, I need a 25% return or a 35% return in this private investment to actually pique my interest. And you're trying to convince the guy that you have a 35% return. Then on the backside, you're saying, if I can satisfy him and her and him's 35% return, I get everything else. And so it's more like maximization of your own economics subject to the other people that you need to get your deal done, if that makes sense.
So yeah, and it makes sense. So I'm curious though, are you, let's say you go into this deal, and you get it, you flip, like you get to the point where you can give their money back plus their return.
Right.
Do you keep the business because you get everything else, or do you then, is part of that selling off the business, or is just a mixed bag based on whether you like the business or not? And like, how do you determine whether you're gonna buy that business and hold it as an investor, pay off your investors, and then you're done, or are you just fixing it? I say fix and flipping. That's a business, right? You're buying something that's down, doubling it, and selling it off.
So what you're trying to figure out is most people, if they're smart and don't just follow the private equity model, because some people just follow the private equity model, and there's lots of benefits to it. I'm not saying there's not. It's
duplicatable, it's proven, all those things. But if you're an innovator, you're going to do something else.
Yeah. So the smartest way I've heard it communicated is you pay off all your investors. You now own more of the equity than you did previously. And your choice is, okay, I've got an asset that's worth $1 million and it's returning me 35% a year. If I sell it, I'm going to go put it in public market at 8%, real estate at 11%. If my opportunity cost isn't, I'm missing on a 50% return opportunity with my money, then it's best to keep your money in the deal. The other thing that happens is, say you buy a $1 million business, you put $200,000 down, you finance $800,000, and over, let's say the business throws off $200,000 of cash flow a year. So boom, 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 5 years or 4 years, you paid off the debt. Now you have $1 million asset that the basis for your investment was $200,000. You've now 5 times your principal, and you paid off all your debt. So now every single dollar of cash flow that comes off the business comes to you. And so at a certain point, you've taken your risk capital off the table, because after you pay off the debt, then the next $200,000 covers your initial investment. At that point, your return is infinite. You've taken your cash basis out of it. So a lot of people hold companies for long periods of time because of that. And here's the exception. There's so many buyers in the market. You have a great business, throws off a great return, and somebody comes and says, hey, I want to overpay for that business, right? Wonderful. And on that day, you say, well, what is overpaying? I'll pay 12 times EBITDA. For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on that note, then I guess the follow-up question is: you've done this investing. How often does it happen that, or is this part of it, and just one of the names of the game, that you have a buyer come and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this type of business with this type of EBITDA, and really I want it to look like this," and you're like, "Well, I don't have anything, quote unquote, in inventory, but I think I could go buy this other business, grow it to that, and in a year I'll have what you want." Like, how often does that happen where you already have a buyer lined up before you enter into a deal, and you don't tell him that you're the one growing the deal? Or maybe the buyer, he just wants the finished product. He doesn't actually want the growing thing. He doesn't want the risk of having to grow it, but you're confident in your ability to grow it. So you're like, okay, well, I'll take the risk up front to grow it here. And then we've got a buyer, and all your investors are happy because they already know it's basically a done deal. As long as we hit these targets, it's offloaded. So
the interesting thing about the deal business is all kinds of stuff happens. So your scenario that you just said, hey, a guy wants a business with $1 million of cash flow, and you see one that's got $500,000 of cash flow, and you know you got a buyer, you might buy that business, grow it, and try to sell it, right? Depending on how lucrative you thought the opportunity was. I think typically people play in one specific area of the market, although there's always innovators that are figuring out nuanced stuff, right? So I represent buyers, but typically on helping them decide if the business they want to buy is worth what they're paying. There's also like buy-side investment bankers who say, hey, Samuel, you want this $1 million in Utah, ski related, right? Mm-hmm. And they'll go find that for you. You have people who are passive buyers. So they'll say, hey, Samuel, you want to go buy something? I'll put my money with you to go figure it out. I don't want to spend the time. I'm a passive investor. So I'm just saying that to say that typically a person who's in a business finder seat isn't all that well suited to buy a company, if that makes sense. They're typically different folks.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And what I love about this conversation is if you're listening to this and you're like, I didn't even know that profession existed. There's a profession for everything. And so much of the things that we use on a regular basis, it doesn't cross our mind that a company made that. Like literally, I'm sitting on a chair that's probably got, 15 different components. And it's very likely that a different company made every one of those components and they all got shipped to one building and a completely separate company assembled it. And then another company mailed it, another company delivered it, and then I'm the reassemble person, right? I mean, it's just, there's every little thing you think, oh, who's doing this? There's a company doing that, right? So no matter how small or insignificant you think something is, it has a place and there's money to be made. And I remember a story. This is funny. So I grew up in Idaho and our neighbors trained horses. Uh-huh. And he was teaching us we could go get some like climbing rope and create like halters and stuff for horses. Super easy. It'd take us maybe 10 minutes to make each one and we could sell them for whatever. Right. So he's like, well, how much would you sell this for? And I was like, I don't know. How much does it cost to make? He's like, well, it costs about $5 to make each one. Yeah. Okay, then probably sell it for 10, right? Why not double my money? And he's like, no, nobody would buy it for 10. You have to be planning on making 5 cents to 10 cents and maybe 25 cents on every one. You plan on making 25 to 50 cents, maybe $1 at the top range. You'll have business for the rest of your life. You charge double, you're going to be starving. And he's just some farmer who's training horses. He loves doing what he's doing. He's not doing this for business. But that lesson I'll always remember. I don't need to make a ton of money on something. I need 1,000 people to give me $100. That's it. Like, I don't need to make thousands and thousands of dollars from each client. I need 1,000 people to give me $100 and I'm $100,000. I need 1,000 people to give me $1,000. And if I'm giving them something worth 10,000 and they're giving me 11, I'm a millionaire. Like, I don't have to be earning so much on everything, where a lot of people who aren't business minded, they're thinking, how do I go from 0 to 100 fast? Well, I only need 5 people to get me there. No, you just need 100 people to get you there on a smaller margin.
Totally agree. And as a personal story, I market my services in a value capacity. So I'm way more H&R Block than Goldman Sachs, right? Mm-hmm. And people are, you should charge more. You're charging X an hour. People in New York is charging 2 to 3 times that. Come on, man, like, charge your worth. And I also market and sell my own services. So people who sit in my seat, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. When you start increasing your prices, you also extend your sales cycle. You also typically decrease your probability of closing business. So for, a small operation like I have, I could charge double what I charge. Sure. Be a lot more phone calls, a lot more narrow misses, a lot more volatility in my revenue, a lot more people who chose somebody else because they were $1,000 less and I would have made money at that $1,000 less price. And I lost that because I needed to charge my worth. There's what I love about the market, to your point about the ropes. The farmer knew the market. He's like, I would pay 20 cents more than what you make it for. And I know all my friends would, you'll be in business. You try to charge a whole bunch more, dude, you can probably go figure out some people who will do it, but you're going to starve. And I think that's the crux of business. Can you sell it? Because the market price for something is the price that somebody will pay for it. The simplest transaction is me selling you a hat on the corner of a street in New York. The price of that hat is what you'll pay for it. And we have a bunch of auctions that happen like that all the time. I mean, I love what you're saying.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, we're running out of time. This is unfortunate because I got a lot more things I would love to ask you, but if somebody wanted to connect with you, if they're inclined to, I've always wanted to buy a business, don't know where to start, where would they actually connect with you at? Sure.
So you go to guardianduediligence.com. And that's GuardianDueDilligence.com. Or if that's too much, go to LinkedIn and find Elliott Holland, ELLIOTT, Holland like the country. You can also find me at Elliott-Holland.com. And then on all those places, you can either connect with me directly or find my email and phone number on those places. And I'm very responsive, all those places.
Awesome. Love that. So this next session called Legacy on Rapid Fire, 1 word, 1 sentence answers. So we're going to keep it brief here, but are you ready to go?
Yes. Rapid fire, baby. Let's do it.
Sweet. So what do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Better time management.
Okay. What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Private equity job.
What's your greatest accomplishment to this point in your life?
Building my own investment management business from scratch, from dust, from nothing.
Love it. If you had one habit, mindset, or behavior secret you don't share with anybody, I'm just kidding, you probably share it with people, but that's fine. A secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you do on a daily basis that we could adopt into our lives to level us up, what would that be?
Get up in the early morning, listen to classical piano music. It'll get your brain going.
Classical piano is the key there. Just kidding. You got to get up too. I love it. And then one or 2 books you think would benefit the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
Ooh, I just get asked this all the time and I love it. How to Win Friends and Influence People is my favorite by far business book, and it's all about communication. I love it. The next one I would give you, I like a book by this guy, James Altucher, called Choose Yourself. And it's about entrepreneurship in a selfish, quirky way, but I think he lays it out beautifully. I'd recommend both books to anyone listening.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to listen to that second one. I absolutely love How to Win Friends and Influence People. Read it once or twice a year since I was 13 years old. So it's a great book, negotiation, everything. So here's the final question. And this is honestly why I do the whole podcast, is for this question. You're like, what? Really? We just wasted all that time? No, we didn't waste any time. Go back and re-listen to it. But this question is very telling, and I love it. So we got to pretend that you've died. You've passed on. You're 6 generations from now. So this is your great, 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 great grandchildren, roughly 100 to 150 years from now. They're sitting around the dinner table discussing your life, discussing the impact you had, the legacy you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
He taught people that were outside of a money-making industry how to get inside a money-making industry.
Perfect. Hey guys, if you didn't get that from him in this podcast, you probably weren't listening close enough. You should probably go listen to it again. But I absolutely can say that after speaking with you, looking at the different things you've done in your life, you're well on your way to that. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your insights here. Your story is incredible. And I learned some things that I'm going to go apply into my own family and see if I can instill some of those beliefs, because I think they're crucial. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And Utah, I'm headed out to Salt Lake City February 3rd to go do some skiing.
Yeah. Well, let's meet up for lunch. Give me a call. Let's meet up for lunch. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll chat soon. Catch you guys later on the Fuel Your Legacy show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.